Welcome to the Newcomers Podcast, where I explore what it means to be an immigrant with immigrants like myself. Today, I am chatting with Donovan Francis, who moved here as a comms person, goes to law school, and ends up becoming a lawyer. Donovan is one of those people that I classify as the resilient lot, who come here having left a really prestigious job back home and have to claw and walk their way back up to what life used to be like back home. Let's get to his story. I feel like, so for immigrants, a ton of people, I've talked to different kinds of people. I feel like there are two types of people. There are people who are kind of starting off. So when they move here, they talk about the struggles, but it's a bit different for them because there's nothing to compare back with. Like you're just saying, oh, I finished school, or maybe I was just starting my career and then I move here. But then there are the people who they've built a prestigious career back home and then they move out to Canada, and it's an interesting experience, to be honest. I don't even know how to fully describe it, but I feel like that your story from the pre-show and talking to you before we got to this point is like you left a prestigious corporate job in Jamaica, moved to Canada to start afresh, and you talk about the point where you're like, I worked in a warehouse, and I just want to just like kind of explore, the mental shift for you, like just that restart, because honestly, man, that is something a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me, Dozy. I'm honored that you've found my story interesting enough to warrant talking to me about it. So, my wife and I moved to Canada from Jamaica. It was 2007, and we moved from sunny Jamaica to Edmonton, Alberta, right? And for anybody who knows anything about Alberta, Alberta in the winter is nothing like Jamaica. So that was an interesting shift for us. And prior to making the move from Jamaica, I worked in an organization as in a quasi government organization. I worked in communications there, so I was part of the communications team, and I had the opportunity to host a television program while there, on behalf of my employer. So I was very happily employed. But my wife and I, we recognize that at the end of the day, Jamaica is a small place, and there's just this big world out there, and we're adventurous. So we wanted another experience. So for us, things were good in Jamaica, but we wanted to see someplace else, and that still is the mindset that we have. And so that's what kind of fueled us and caused us to make that switch to Edmonton, Alberta, of all places. At the time, Alberta was booming because it was going through that oil and gas boom, and there was this huge demand for highly skilled and foreign educated people. And so that's why we chose Alberta. And at the end of the day, Alberta was good to us, but the thing is, in Canada, perhaps like many other places, the transition from what you were or would have been originally doing in your home country to something similar here in Canada does not always happen right away. And for me, it took me a while to get back into my communications role. It took me less than a year, but close to a year. And then within the time period from when I got here to when I got back into a similar role, we needed to survive. And
Yeah.
so that is when we, upon arrival, just a month or two after getting here, we decided, okay, we have to take whatever job opportunity presents itself initially,
Yeah.
so as not to deplete our savings and so on.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you put it, honestly, because I always people have this thing where they say they call it survival jobs, and I'm like, like I get the sense of that, but again, also I really like how you describe it, where it's get going, like start off. Because I mean, it's not. I feel like it's not great that people have to sometimes wait that long to kind of settle, find the jobs that they
Hmm.
qualify for. I don't think that's fair. But I also think that maybe there's a balance between there's a transition period, like where you're just kind of finding your foot,
That's right.
because they say it's a two-way street. It's the society's trying to understand you, you're trying to understand society. I think we're always trying to think of it like, oh, I'm the only one who's in the loop, but I feel like the society is also in the loop. Now the question is, okay, can we make it a bit much faster than
Yes.
it normal, especially in Canada? Because I feel like
Yes.
Canada does have this unique issue where immigrants tend to kind of struggle to find something worth going initially. The Canadian experience, all the other things, the categorizations that come in with, oh, what are you doing? But you're a lawyer right now. Like, how did you go from comms to law? Were you always a lawyer back in Jamaica? Like,
No, I wasn't. And the truth is that when I left Jamaica, my intention was to get into law school right away.
oh,
But that didn't happen. Getting into law school here can be a challenge if your first degree did not come from a Canadian institution. I mean, nobody tells you that explicitly, but it can be a deterrent. And so when I first came to Canada, I actually applied to about 7 law schools unsuccessfully, right? A year or so after coming. And so I figured, okay, perhaps I needed to get a Canadian degree. And
yeah,
so I went back to school at the University of Alberta. I did a master's degree in communications, all while I was, working there, in a communications role, thankfully. And after doing that, I felt like, okay, I was in a position now where it was going to be very difficult for these law schools to tell me
to say no.
that they didn't want me in their programs. So I went at it again, after having done that. And thankfully, I was able to get into Osgood, which is, one of the preferred law schools. Well, at least one of my preferred law school options at the time.
That's such an interesting thing in the sense that the. I mean, I always find it amazing when I see folks like you who come here, restart again, switch careers, and kind of build a new life again. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of these things they say that why immigration is a superpower, because literally just that resetting that you do to your brain almost it makes you. I feel like it makes you smarter, it makes you better. You come off as a much
It
better
challenges
individual.
you for
Yeah,
sure. I mean, Canada has challenged me in many positive ways, because one of the good things here is that you have the opportunity to see other people who've come and who've been able to thrive notwithstanding the challenges,
yes,
right? And so
yes,
that then gives you inspiration, and it sets out a challenge in front of you, something to aspire towards. And so in many ways Canada has done that, and that's why I felt confident, applying to law school even after having settled in a career, and
mm,
was doing well and progressing in that career. I felt comfortable doing that. And then after getting into law school, completing law, and working in a law firm, equally I felt comfortable venturing out on my own and starting another firm. Because there were instances of others out there who'd come to this country and had done something similar. So I felt that there was no reason why I wasn't able to do that as well.
yeah. I want to talk about your law experience, but and building a law firm. But I first want to talk about something you mentioned, which we just talked about it in passing. Sunny Jamaica and freezing cold Edmonton. What was that change like, honestly? Because I know what I felt like when I moved from Lagos to Ottawa, and I'm just like, and I know Jamaica is really tropical. Like, what
Yes.
was that change like, honestly?
So we did a lot of research, All right. We did a lot of research prior to coming, so we had a sense of, at least the climate. We had a sense of what that was going to be, and we thought we had a sense of, how we were going to be received. Um, when we actually made the move, people were very. So something I discovered about, Western Canada is that people are polite. People for the most part were very helpful, which is something that kind of took us off guard, yeah, at least in Edmonton. So people were very warm and welcoming, and that was great. I think the most stunning thing for us was actually, in the middle of winter. I remember quite vividly the first snowfall that we experienced. My wife and I, we were so excited. The pretty fluffy stuff were coming down. And we held our heads up and we looked up at the snowflakes. It was a beautiful sight. And we felt fantastic. But then the stuff wouldn't stop coming down, Rosie. And then it just kept coming and coming. And in Alberta, the winter goes on for 6-7 months of the year.
Yeah.
And so the most, stunning memory I have is one day when we just got there, our first winter, we were, no, I was in our small apartment looking out, and there was just a lot of snow on the road, maybe a foot of snow or something. And in Alberta, they don't use salt, right? They use dirt and gravel, not salt. The roads are not salted, and so the snow stays there until the plow comes. And then there was this woman pushing her cart, her shopping cart. I don't know how she got it out of the supermarket, but she's trying to push this shopping cart across the road, right, in a foot of snow. And I'm looking at this thing, the wind is swirling, the snow is coming down, it's freezing cold, the road is just a mess, and I'm saying, my God, what is this we've gotten ourselves into? So that was perhaps the most sobering experience I had in Alberta. But for the most part, though, as far as the transition goes, Alberta was good to us. We were able to progress in our careers after the initial settling in period. And overall, Alberta was good to us.
Just curious. So why did you all move to Ontario? Work, life, like why? Why did you move to Ontario?
Oh, so I went because of law school. So
Ah,
I my when I applied to law schools afterwards, the first school that responded favorably was Osgoode Hall Law School in Toronto, and I
oh,
just
nice.
decided to go with it. I was going to take any chances, so it was because of that why we actually relocated from Alberta. But Edmonton, from the experiences that we had, it's a great city, man. And perhaps had it not been for this law school situation, we
You would
might
have
not
stayed there.
have left Edmonton.
Yeah. You know, just wondering, like, if you think about your when you settled into Edmonton and then when you moved to Mississauga, Ontario,
Yeah,
was it easier to settle into Mississauga? Were there any cultural differences between the Eastern and Western Canada that hit you hard?
interesting. Cultural differences. So the eastern part of Canada is more diverse, right? When I went to Osgoode, you know, there was some special event that the faculty were having, right? So it was a faculty event, but they had extra snacks, and so they invited the students to come on in and partake of the snacks. And when I went in, I realized that the snacks were Jamaican patties, and this wasn't an event for Jamaicans, and so that was an eye opener for me because I realized that's when I started realizing how culturally diverse Eastern Canada is and Mississauga, which boards that was a good thing for us because at that time we had one kid and we wanted her to grow up knowing her culture, being
Yeah.
exposed to her culture and people who were from societies like she was. And so from that perspective, moving to Mississauga was definitely advantageous. But in other respects, Edmonton, Alberta, from a financial and an economic point of view, I still
Right.
think that Alberta is going to be a better option.
Hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in Calgary. I love Alberta. Honestly,
Oh, did you?
I love it. I really love it here. We landed in Ottawa first. We
Hmm.
lived there for like a year, but then it was so clear to me that I wanted to come to Calgary, and so we moved out to Calgary. And like, I've not looked back. I've not looked back. I've lived in Canada 4 years now. Calgary 3 years. I'm like, gosh, I love the city. I mean, I also love Edmonton. I just love Calgary more. So
Yeah. That's allowable. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay for you to
yeah.
prefer Calgary to Edmonton.
Yeah. Like staying on transitions, I'm always curious like, about how because I know back home, and I assume Jamaica is the same. We're very communal. We're very we live in big families. Parties. People just come into your house without sending you a calendar invite. Like how we do in
Yeah,
Canada here.
I know.
I'm just curious, like how the move um affect their relationships back home? Like, is it still the same? How do you manage that? How do you keep that going?
Yes. I mean, because of social media, it makes it much, much easier. So, I still maintain contact with friends I grew up with. But the thing with Jamaica is, people migrate a lot. So many of the friends that I would have had in Jamaica, they themselves may have moved on to other places, Canada, the US, the UK, and so on. But for the most part, we do keep in touch through social media. But you're right in terms of this your description of that one distinction between Canadian society and societies like those that you and I come from. It's much more communal, and I tell my daughter all the time that growing up, I never had to pay anybody to be entertained. We just step outside the house and go, find some neighbors or kids or friends someplace, and we just start, laughing about the simplest of things, right? And it was unorganized, it wasn't planned, it was just organic and communal. While in Canada, things like those have to be more organized. Play dates are a thing in Canada,
Yeah.
whereas where we come from, that's a
No,
foreign
it's just the
concept.
play dates are outside every evening.
Yes, that's right. So little things like those you learn, as you go along.
Yeah. Staying on that a bit, like, what do you think you left behind there physically, emotionally when you moved to Canada? Is there a part
Um,
of you left behind?
Part of me, I don't think so. I mean, I made the move. I made the decision to move to Canada, wholeheartedly. We knew what we were getting into. But that said, I mean, there's no place like home, and so there are aspects of life in Jamaica that you miss. The what we just described, that sense of community that allowed you to just go, chat outside without issue. That's one very obvious thing that's missing. When I was in Alberta, I missed the food because Jamaican food wasn't as readily accessible. It was available, but it wasn't as really readily accessible as it is, say, in Mississauga and so on.
Okay.
But even so, nothing beats the authentic,
Yeah.
Caribbean food in the same way that I suspect you may miss having
Oh,
some of
I
the
miss
jollof.
Jollof. Yeah, I do.
So yeah.
Yeah. I it's interesting. I'm when you said that, I keep wondering also because I think about that a lot. Is that when we talk about the theme we miss, is it nostalgia or is it do we really miss those things? Like, because I feel like society moves on, like society leaves us behind, and what we have are memories of a time that doesn't really exist
anymore.
anymore.
You may be right. You may be right. We may be here hanging on to memories of and experiences that we had when we were kids that people in Jamaica today are no longer
Aren't exactly
experiencing.
having.
So you may be right, but I mean, I guess
Still
those are
doesn't change
what.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they fuel us, and we get to annoy our kids with those stories. So
With
they
the
serve a
stories
purpose.
and those cultural nuances that are like, Daddy,
Oh
why
yeah,
are you doing this? I'm
oh
like, well,
yeah.
that's how I was raised. My son is
That's
like,
right.
what do you mean?
That's right.
That's not how we do it in Canada. I'm like, well,
Yeah, it's part of the process, and I enjoy just relating those things. I have a 12-year-old who's going on 13, and yeah, I like regaling her with those stories.
yeah. Now, since we're kind of beating that topic a bit. Like, so if you think about yourself from a identity heritage point of view, and you've been here since 2007, and that's give or take, that's almost 20 years now.
Hmm.
That's about like about 17
17.
years or
Yeah.
so, about that. Yeah, so that's a while, and that's literally a big part of your life. In business cycles,
Hmm.
that's like three business cycles and more.
Yeah.
And then you have a 12-year-old kid, which means that being a father here has also shaped who you are. And so if you think of who Donovan Francis is today, you know, who are you? Like Jamaican, Canadian, Jamaican,
Hmm.
mostly Jamaican with a smattering of Canada, because of your kid. Like, what's your identity? Like, how do you see yourself right now?
Yeah. Good question. So I identify myself first as a dad. So I'm a dad of two kids. A 12-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I identify myself first as a dad and a husband. I'm a Jamaican Canadian. That's how I describe myself. I was made in Jamaica. I came to Canada, when I was an adult after having completed my first degree and had already been married. So I'm Jamaican and I'm Canadian. And I believe that one of the beautiful things about Canada is that Canada allows you to be both, unlike other societies. I mean, I've heard stories of people who've gone to the US and who've had to go to great lengths to mask, who their heritage. I don't feel that way in Canada. I feel like you can be Ukrainian and Canadian at the same time. I feel like you can be Nigerian and Canadian at the same time. I feel like you can be Jamaican and Canadian at the same time, without people turning up their noses at you. And so I guess that has made me comfortable, embracing, my Jamaican heritage just as much as I embrace my Canadian heritage, and my clients know who I am. My clients come, it's part of my pitch. I tell my story. And I believe it resonates with people. So that's who I am. I'm a family guy. I'm a Canadian, and I'm Jamaican first.
So how do you not deal with your kids? I mean, because I imagine your kids are. So I say this all the time. I feel like our kids we're in between as immigrants. We're always in between cultures because we are Jamaican, Nigerian. I mean, Jamaican, Canadian, Nigerian. We're just in between there. But our kids are also in between. But I feel like it's kind of flipped. That's my assumption. So like our kids are usually Canadian first and Nigerian second because they
Yeah.
are primarily growing up in this culture. But then because they live in a Nigerian home and they have Nigerian uncles and grandparents
Yes.
come around, that sort of
Yes.
affects that cultural part of them still stays.
Yes.
But I'm always interested in how parents manage to just kind of keep that culture strong within the family. Like, so how do you
Yes.
manage that? Especially like with your 12-year-old who's getting very,
Yes.
very conscious. Like that's
Yes.
the word. They're very conscious about who they are and
Yes.
their place in the world.
Yes. No, great question. Well, first of all, my wife and I think it's important to allow them, her, the 12-year-old, and the other one, to embrace their Canadianness. And she's fiercely Canadian. So, like we're into soccer a lot. She's into soccer, I'm into soccer. And if there's ever a game between Canada and Jamaica, she's going to be fiercely Canadian, and she's going to be really ribbing me and all of that stuff. So we encourage that because she's Canadian,
Yeah.
just as we are, but she was born here. So we encourage that. But we equally, find ways to keep them rooted in their culture. And we do that through the food we prepare at home and through music.
Oh
We're
gosh.
from a culture where we enjoy music. So, we play a lot of music in the household. And so, on any given weekend, if you were to come by our house, you're going to be hearing Afro beats, you're going to be hearing reggae, and you're gonna see my kids dancing to these
Nice.
tunes. Yeah, and dancing properly too. Making the right moves and all of that. But the idea there is to ground them. And then I'm a bit of a history buff as well, so I continually seek out opportunities to tell them a little bit of their history, not just their history in the Caribbean, but their history going back 6,000 years, whether it be in Egypt, or beyond. So that's what we do to kind of keep them grounded. And then lastly, more recently, we just look for an opportunity to just take them to. We were in East Africa for an entire year, just to
Gosh, I want to so
yeah,
do
just to
that.
yeah, just to get them grounded and immersed. So yeah, so those are some of the things that we do in order to ensure that there's balance.
Gosh, I want to do that. Like I know somewhere in my head, I'm saying to myself that yeah, before my son is 13, 14, I just want to go live in Nigeria is a bit of an interesting place right now. But even if it's in Ghana or Kenya or somewhere in Africa, just for like 6 months to a year, just live there, get a sense of what Africa is like and what
It
you
was the
can
most
what
beautiful experience.
yeah.
And my older kid, we registered her in school for a year. She had the time of her life. Though she would mope and complain about, missing aspects of life in Canada. But, when she didn't know we weren't watching, we saw her having, the time of her life. So we know she had a good time.
Oh yeah, I think it's important for the kids actually because yeah, I mean we back home we do a lot of these things where we're like, oh yeah, you need to get through school as fast as you can, but I'm beginning to think that you don't need to. You need to get through life with as much of lessons you can take from it. So if you spend 1 year traveling around African countries, the
Yeah.
lessons you learn there are going to stay with you for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And if that
Yes.
means you graduate from high school 1 year later, it's totally worth it. Like so worth it. Something else you mentioned, it was interesting you said food and music. Because I forget who said this to me some days ago or weeks ago actually. Someone said for immigrants, the part of culture that stays the longest is food. And when you added music, I think it's music. Music is part of that too. So when we move to a new place, our culture starts to morph. First of all, we try to hold on to our traditions more strongly than those back home. Like Derek Silva says this to me, like we hold on when we go back home. The things we do, people are like, no, we don't do like that anymore because for us, like that's how that's what our identity is. But even that itself changes over time. The one thing that rarely changes is the food. There are certain meals that always stay the same
Yes.
and they get handed down from generation to generation to generation. And so
Yes.
when you said food, I was like, yeah. Then music. Like when you now called music, I'm like, yeah, music too, because music you can't change music. You pass on the beats. You
Yes.
pass on the beat down. Like
Yes. The
I still
genre
play
gets
Lucky
passed on.
Dube.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still play Lucky Dube up till now. It hasn't
Yeah.
changed. It is just the Dube sound is still the Dube sound. That kind
There
of
you
thing.
go.
I'm like, yeah, those are the things that they really, really, really help because
They
yeah,
do, and and when you do that, sooner or later you hear your kids humming an old song that you grew up hearing, and you're saying, "Yes, that's such a beautiful thing,"
I
you
won.
know. Yeah, you hear your daughter happily, humming to a Peter Tosh song. You know,
Oh
this was like
gosh.
way back.
She's
You
humming
know,
to a Peter Tosh.
oh yeah. I mean, because she's exposed to all of that, old school stuff. But
Gosh.
for me, that's a sign that I'm doing things well.
Yeah. Because I think feel like people sometimes just hold on to the wrong things, which is like, oh, this is how we greet back home. This is how we. No, I'm like, no, like culture changes, but I think there are things that really help, and it's also beautiful because music and food are pretty easy ways to get people immersed in a culture because you can find the things they like about those things and then just encourage it. Every other
Yeah,
thing is usually very resistant. Like,
yeah,
this is how we greet back home, so do that. The child is like, no, I don't want to do that because I don't understand why I should do that. But Peter Tosh is like, I like Peter Tosh, so I'm going to listen to Peter Tosh.
yeah.
And then you start to hear things that, because all those songs talk about home in different ways from different angles,
Yes.
you know.
And I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the mindset too of the parents who moved here, because not everybody who moves into these environments wants to take along with them, elements of their culture and heritage. I've personally encountered people who would want to wash their hands of all aspects of their heritage. And so in those kinds of cases, you'll likely find kids who are devoid of any kind of cultural connectedness, because of that. So the parents' mentality also is an important
Plays a
factor, I
role.
believe.
Yeah. I always find that sad though. I mean, I get people have various reasons for doing that. I'm just like, but like
Sometimes
someone
it's
said,
in an effort, sometimes they mean well. Sometimes it's in an effort to assimilate, to because their interpretation or understanding of these kinds of societies is that you need to blend in and to detach yourself as much as possible from that which makes you different, and just try to blend in as much as possible. And oftentimes some people believe that that's going to be their kids' best interest, and that gets reflected in so many things, including what names you give to your kids, what you feed them, what they see, what they listen to, and so on. So
yeah,
yeah.
you just give me an idea of something.
Oh yeah, good.
Yeah,
I won't
I'm
I
gonna
won't charge you
exploit.
for that idea.
Yeah, you should charge me honestly
No,
because
I
if
won't
I
charge
can
you for
put
that
you,
one.
if I can pull it off, it's very interesting. Because I was I started thinking about people who have been around immigrated for a while and just see if there are things that like what are the things they regret the most. Because I think about this heritage thing a lot: heritage, language, identity, culture, assimilation and integration. I tell people that I don't like the word assimilation. I prefer integration because I feel like assimilation is you cannot like I think it's you can't really wipe out who you are. My
Yeah.
4 year old my 4 year old can't even fully wipe out the 4 years my 8 year old left Nigeria when he was 4. He can't even fully wipe out the 4 years he spent in Nigeria. There's still those memories still come to him every now and then. Then
Hmm.
talk more of someone who leaves the country when they're in their 30s or in their 40s or in their 20s. And I wonder if when you do that, if it comes back to you later as you get older and you start to pine for certain things or you start to disassociate because you're struggling with what you're trying to do is uproot yourself and plant a new tree. But the human being doesn't work like a plant that way that you just what's that thing they call again where we cut off a bud and go plant another one in agric so that it can grow off there. I'm like,
Like
human beings
grafting.
don't. Yeah,
Hmm.
grafting. Yeah, human beings don't. We don't graft. It's not the brain is not a skin cell that you take from the face and go put on the leg.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. No.
I guess it's the answers are in the people's heads. I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. I mean, human beings are not quite the same as other creatures, and therefore we cannot abandon as much as we try, we cannot
Yes.
abandon that which, molded us,
Mm-hmm.
especially
Mm-hmm.
those of us who've moved to these societies late in life.
Yeah.
We are who we are,
Yep.
but that does not take away from our ability to embrace the new
Yes.
society,
Oh
the new
yes.
country, and to become Canadian while still maintaining the heritage of the country we came from originally.
Yeah. So we're kind of rounding up right now, and I saved that. I feel like this is the best question for the last, which is you've built a law firm. Like, yo, like first of all, like that's wild to me because you go from you come here as a comms person, get yourself back to your what you're doing back in Jamaica, go do a masters, go to law school, come out, launch a business, and I think if you look back now and all the things, all the experience so far, like what are you like top three, top five tips for anyone who's an immigrant looking to launch a business, just from your perspective? Like what are the things that they need to keep front and center, like every single time as they try to get going?
Yeah, good question. I think if you're going to be launching a business, the first thing is you need to know who you're trying to target. With that business, who are you trying to reach? One, two, you need to be clear on what exactly you're going to be selling. As lawyers in law school, we're trained to be practitioners and kind of general practitioners. And so you'll find that most lawyers, when they do set up a business, they're offering family law services, they're offering immigration law services, they're offering criminal law service. They're offering the whole suite of things. But the truth is that you can't be all things to all people. As much as they'll tell you that they're good at all things, you cannot be all things to all people. And so, one advice I'd provide to, anybody going into business is to be clear on, what it is that you want to provide. Try to be as niche as you possibly can, and find the market that desires that, or rather identify the market, a niche market, and then provide that service to them. Those two things are important. A third thing is this whole notion of client service, and coming to Canada really helped me, develop those skills, because in some of the environments from which some of us come, customer service is not always, the at the highest levels. And so that I've discovered is something that is very, very important. And so somebody wanting to set up their own business must understand, the importance of being able to not just woo prospective clients, but how to keep clients, by, caring for them, anticipating their needs, and all of those things. That's going to be equally important. A fourth thing is, something that we leverage a lot, and that is using technology. No matter the business you're going into, there will be opportunities to use technology, whether it is on the marketing side or otherwise. But given how things are going now, the more you leverage technology, the easier it is going to be for you to compete and to be efficient. So those are four things that I would recommend to anybody who is looking to go into a business now. Be clear about what services you offer, and try to be as specialized as you can. Be clear about the audience. Offer good customer service, and try to leverage as many technology tools as possible, and have those dispersed throughout your business so as to make you more efficient.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like that idea of it's out of all those three. I really especially like the one where you mentioned the customer service thing, because I feel like
Yes.
that's like you're right. Sometimes we come from environments where we take that for granted,
Yes.
and here it's not
No.
it's
It
not at all.
matters.
Yeah, I think the last question for me is if you look back now, like is there one thing you would have done differently in hindsight? Like yes, we mostly might not change anything, but is there one thing you was like, I would have approached it differently when I was planning to land, when I landed, when I was going to law school? Is there one thing you've done differently?
Not really. Not really, because in hindsight, you know, my experience in Canada has been good. And we did a lot of research prior to coming, so we had a clear idea of what to expect. We knew, for instance, that we weren't going to, get right back into the line of work that we had been in prior to coming to Canada. So there were no real surprises, if I'm to be honest with you. So is there like a major regret? No, I can't put my finger on one. Are there things that I would have liked to have happened more quickly? Absolutely. I would have liked to have gotten into law school way earlier. I would have liked to have skipped the transitional jobs that I did, and so on. But there's absolutely no major regret after having made that decision. However number of years that would have been.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Dozy.
Honestly, it was a pleasure for me, honestly. Gosh, it was so good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you much.
Thank you for getting to this point of the podcast. As always, if you know someone who finds this useful, please share with them. If you know someone we should talk to, send them my way. And please like, share, subscribe, follow us. We're on Substack, we're on YouTube, we're anywhere you get your podcast. The Newcomers Podcast, as always. Peace out.